GB News may be where the truth goes to die, but its record on investment isn't so hot either. You may recall the heady days when the channel was launched in 2021 as the UK equivalent of Fox News. Since then, it has faced, quote, growing pains, including the departure of key talent like Andrew Neil, its founding directors and financiers, and many more jumping ship. And of course, many gaffes. Despite this, the right-wing channel has gained a small but growing audience. In December 2022, GB News managed to rack up nearly 3 million viewers. And for context, Sky News had a monthly reach of 8.5 million. It should, however, be noted that the daily average viewing time for GB News was only 41 seconds, which might explain why the channel's accounts are just so uneven. The channel has reported a £31 million pre-tax loss in its first year on air. Ouch. Companies House records show that the biggest outgoing for GB News are the cost of sales and operating expenses in the year to May 2022. £25.4 million went on cost of sales, which, in case you don't know, because I didn't either, means how much it costs to produce goods or a service. And £8.9 million was spent on operating expenses. Some of that money under those banners, of course, is going on attempts to attract marquee names like Nigel Farage and former GMTV host turned Tory MP Esther McVey. And as a Press Gazette report shows, this on-screen talent commands a pretty hefty price tag. McVey was paid £58,650 by GB News in 2022, and her husband, fellow Tory MP Philip Davis, £46,203 according to PA Media. In December, Press Gazette found GB News had spent the most of any publisher on payments to MPs, spending £82,040 between October 2021 and September 2022. The company spent £11 million on wages and salaries in the most recent year, implying mean employee remuneration was just over £63,000. Despite these massive wages, it doesn't look like GB News is going anywhere, even with those losses taken into account. The big bosses say they are, quote, satisfied with the results for the year and expect growth in the future performance of the company. They've got a pretty savvy financial buffer too. In August 2022, GB News got a massive £60 million cash injection from Brexiteer businessman Paul Marshall and Legatum, a Dubai-based investment company. This was despite the publicly messy departure of Spectator chairman Andrew Neil and the resignation of the original GB News directors. The channel also recently earned a reprimand from the UK broadcast regulator Ofcom. An investigation found that ex-presenter Mark Stein had made, quote, potentially harmful and materially misleading claims about COVID-19 vaccines on his primetime daily show. Stein resigned from GB News in February after the channel tried to make him personally pay any fines that might be issued by Ofcom for breaches of UK broadcasting law. Ofcom has now said it won't be issuing any fines or sanctions, despite finding GB News broke regulations, so Mark Stein might be cursing the day he filmed a video and talked about the compliance officer at GB News being Ofcom's bitch.
GB News was never going to be a moneymaker. It was about advancing a particular kind of very, very reactionary, very, very authoritarian right-wing populism. And I would say in terms of their successes, it's difficult to see whether they're having the impact and skewing the rest of the media coverage rightwards, or if that was just the direction of travel anyway. Their audience, where they're going for, socially conservative older viewers, despite all of the moral panics around cancel culture and, you can't turn on TV without seeing mixed race, transgender people everywhere. Actually, these are audiences which are exceptionally well served when it comes to news content. Everybody is competing for them, from BBC, ITV, Sky News, and of course Talk TV as well. So they're always going after a really small audience. I'm not certain that GB News has become the sort of influential political force it had hoped to be, but with the deep pockets of their backers, they can afford to sort of sit back, wait and see where they're going. There has, of course, been a real pivot away from what they said they were going to do, which is original news gathering, breaking stories from outside of London, that kind of thing, and just replicating the kind of chatter and opinion led content, which I think that at the start they had said that they were maybe a little bit skeptical of, or if not, outright snooty about. That's why they're getting Nigel Farage and Jacob Rees-Mogg and all of these Tory MPs and marquee names. It's basically like running a really, really expensive podcast. And of course, Talk TV have done the exact same thing with the marquee name of Piers Morgan, basically all opinion. And they've done it in a much more slimmed down way, because outside of the handful of programs that it actually airs live, the rest of the time it's just the talk radio studio going out live on TV. So yeah, we'll have to see where it goes and whether it's actually going to pay off in terms of helping drag the media ecology rightwards. Because I thought that had been going very well even before the Legatum Institute, is it? I never know how to pronounce that one, ever dipped into their own pockets.
As Ash helpfully reminded us there, GB News is not the only right-wing media money pit on the scene. Part of the reason for that channel's huge outgoings is so it can compete with Rupert Murdoch's Talk TV, launched in April last year. Talk TV is home to the likes of Isabel Oakeshott and Jeremy Kyle. Its viewership is even smaller than GB News, but salaries rival it. Piers Morgan is reported to have signed a £50 million 3-year deal to host his daily flagship talk show. Of course, there happens to be a shortage of left-wing billionaires, so if you do want to support independent media, you can do that by visiting novara.media/support and backing us from £1 a month. But while we're here, there's one more development in the GB News saga that I'd like to discuss, which is the increasing infighting taking place within the government over the amount of Tory MPs signing up for slots on the channel, despite its questionable content and occasional Ofcom regulation breaches. Tory Vice Chair and professional offence merchant Lee Anderson is the latest serving MP to get his own GB News talk show, and he is the 5th Tory MP to sign up to the GB talent roster. But an Evening Standard diary entry suggests unrest in the ranks. They write, "We hear that some in the party are hoping for better scrutiny of some of GB News' content. Last week, Commons leader Penny Mordaunt made a biting speech on the alarmist nonsense on GB News, saying that it is sandwiched between credible content. She quoted a recent monologue by presenter Neil Oliver, which falsely alleged a government conspiracy over food shortages and wrongly implied air raids in Ukraine are fake, calling them sound effects. Could there be a crackdown on some of the wilder elements on the channel soon?" It's interesting as well, of course, because GB News was meant to be the outsider, and now it's got a regular influx of establishment politicians appearing on its own news shows. Ash, but is GB News so fringe, even the Tories don't think that it's a useful mouthpiece?
This is the kind of pickle that the Tories are in at the moment, which is, yes, they do have a very authoritarian faction of their electoral base who really like the red meat of, bring back hanging and, fire asylum seekers into the sun and all that kind of stuff. But when you look at the kinds of seats that the Conservatives have been losing so far, in particular more in the southeast and the southwest, where they're really competing directly with the Liberal Democrats, it's a very different kind of voter. So these were voters who were quite turned off even just by the rhetoric of levelling up. Just the idea that some resources might be directed away from them. And if you add to that a sense of rowing back on the kind of social liberalism plus runaway asset price appreciation that they're really into, they're like, well, hang on, we're served quite nicely by the Lib Dems, please and thank you. So this could be something which ends up biting them in the arse. Yes, they have their very own TV station in which they're allowed to say whatever mad shit they want. 15-minute cities means that you're banned from ever venturing to the Midlands again, or COVID vaccine made somebody's cousin in Trinidad balls swell up and then he got broken up with by his fiance. You can say all of that stuff, but there might be an electoral cost to making that a much more visible part of your political offering.